Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. This is a video of the tragic events taking place in South Africa. This is in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. The video itself shows a victim in the foreground, in the background, being stamped by some of the local people. The victim was a Zimbabwean. It's just gruesome to play it. But several of them were reportedly killed. This is not the first time Zimbabweans have read about stories about the xenophobia attacks of Zimbabweans in South Africa. No human being should be treated like that. You would hesitate to kill any living thing with such brutality, much less a fellow human being. And these victims are being attacked. Their crime is none other than they are Zimbabwean. And those South African people who are attacking them, they just don't want to see them there. The problem of Zimbabweans flooding to South Africa has been going on for the last 20 years plus. Ever since Zanu PF started its land invasion, farm invasion to take away the farm from the white farmers since 2000. And that triggered the economic collapse. Many Zimbabweans have found themselves being forced to leave the country, to go to South Africa and many of the other countries in the region and beyond as economic and political refugees. So for the last 24, 25 years, the situation has only got progressively worse. What is disappointing here is that Zimbabwe's economic and political problem is a man-made problem. We must emphasize that point. This is a man-made problem. Bad governance is the root cause of Zimbabwe's economic collapse. And we don't seem to have a solution to it. And yet the solution is staring us in the face. By the late 1990s, it was clear that Zimbabwe was heading for trouble. As long as the country had Zanu PF in government, the regime was failing to deliver on its promise of economic prosperity, or as Mugabe would call it, kutsaro zhinji. By the late 1990s, it was clear Gusarushinji mass prosperity was turning into mass poverty. Question then was what to do about it. Well, the country had gone through a liberation war. When the white oppressive regime was denying the people a meaningful say in the governance of the country, the nation decided to go into war. So the question was, should the nation go back to an armed struggle to remove Zanu PF? The consensus decision was, no, let's elect opposition parties, because the country still had one binding policy that even Zanu PF was not able to ignore. The obligation to hold elections. Zanu PF had managed to stay in power from 1980, the first elections. They were not free, fair, and credible. Zanu PF told the people that if Zanu PF does not win the 1980 elections, the Bush War would continue. And there's no doubt that people voted to end the Bush War. And so, one man, one vote was thrown out of the window. And when the regime got into power, its number one priority was to consolidate its hold on power. Within 3 years of our independence, the nation was dragged into the Kukurawundi massacre, whose primary purpose was to force PF SAPU to give up being a rivalry political party with the potential to challenge Robert Mugabe's Zanu PF's monopoly on power. The idea was to force the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo and his colleagues to sign the Unity Accord and unite the two parties, PF SAPU and ZANU. This happened finally in 1984. And this cleared the deck as far as Mugabe was concerned to impose the de facto one-party state. And so by the late 1990s, it was clear Zimbabwe, as long as it remains a de facto one-party state and Zanu PF in power, nothing would change. The people made a decision, and I think it was the right decision, that instead of going back to the Bush War to fight another liberation war to end the Zanu PF dictatorship, let's use the window, the opportunity to elect opposition, whose number one purpose would be to implement democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Zanu PF viewed the existence of the opposition as a threat to the country's unity, as they called it. Nonetheless, people risked all to elect the opposition. And in 2008, under pressure from SADC, Zimbabwe came to what is the closest it had ever got to holding free, fair, and credible elections in the March vote. When Mnangagwa and the Zanu PF, the other Zanu PF leaders, realized that the Zanu PF was losing big, the March vote, they stepped in, stopped SEC declaring the results, and went on to spend the next 6 weeks recounting 5 million votes. And whittling down the opposition spectrum. Now, Morgan Tsvangirai, who had scored 73% of the votes, according to Mugabe's fraudulent slip of the tongue, it was whittled down to 47%, enough to force the runoff. During the runoff, Zanu PF used wanton violence to force people to vote for Zanu PF, the Zanu PF candidate Mugabe. Here is Mnangagwa boasting of his role in the 2008 presidential runoff.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa mulipi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komo kuenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvo zvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvipi gadzirai chi cabinet asina kuda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35 they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusurufaro. We know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
Tragedy is Zanu PF did go the whole distance. Over 500 MDC leaders and members, supporters, were murdered during the 3 months of the runoff. Hundreds of thousands were beaten, raped, and or had their properties destroyed. Millions were internally displaced. Zimbabwe had never seen that level of wanton election-related violence. SADC could not accept Mugabe and claim that he had won the runoff. And so Zanu PF was forced to go into a GNU whose primary purpose was to implement the democratic reforms, which, if implemented, would have stopped Zanu PF rigging the elections. This point cannot be overemphasized. Unfortunately, no meaningful reforms were implemented, and so the opportunity was lost. This is where we are as a country. We cannot pretend that we did not have the opportunity to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. We did. So our problem is that the economic collapse and political crisis was a man-made problem in the sense that Zanu PF created the problem. And this has been compounded by the fact that we, the people, failed to make sure that MDC implemented the democratic reforms when they had the opportunity to do so. What is happening in South Africa is heartbreaking. The question is, how long are we going to allow this situation to continue? Because as long as we don't do anything to address the underlying causes of bad governance in Zimbabwe, the economic and political crisis will only get worse. And we'll see more of this outrageous ill treatment of fellow Zimbabweans in South Africa, and let's hope it's not going to spread to other countries as well. We need to end this man-made problem of rigged elections and bad governance. We can end it even now if we stop the foolishness of participating in flawed elections when we have been warned that doing so will only give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. In 2023, millions of Chamisa supporters participated in those elections because they believed Chamisa's idiotic lie that Triple C was going to win big because he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. We need to wake up. It is not rocket science to see the sheer futility of participating in flawed elections to perpetuate this Zanu PF dictatorship. My condolences to all the families who have their relatives killed or seriously injured in the most recent xenophobia attacks in South Africa. It is heartbreaking. And I did not have the heart to show the video because I think it will be terrible for anyone to see that that is how their own relative was killed. We need to end Zimbabwe's problem of bad governance, of rigged elections, and bad governance as a matter of urgency. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.